I've always been associated with grief. I suddenly started having the angels come to me. Coming across the lake, we had all these little orbs of light coming towards us. And all of a sudden, we were encircled by about 15 beautiful monarch butterflies. They were working with energies far beyond our world. It's up to us to free our mind of these sort of human constraints that we put on it.
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Medium's Table. I'm your host, Michelle Gardner. This podcast is your personal invitation to join me at the intersection of the everyday and the extraordinary. Together, we'll explore the magic of mediumship, share spiritual stories, and connect with fellow mediums on this incredible journey. So grab a seat, pour yourself a cuppa, and come join us at the Medium's Table, where spirits gather and stories unfold. I'd like to welcome to the show Laura Lee. Welcome to the show, Laura Lee.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for having me on.
You're most welcome. I'm excited to hear what you've got to share with us today because I don't know your story. So this is going to be a first, not only for the viewers and listeners, but a first for me. So I'm intrigued, curious, and can't wait to hear how your life has unraveled. But firstly, before we go on, I'd really love for you to tell everybody what it is that you do.
Okay, so I've been developing for quite a long time. And I think I have done evidential mediumship. But my focus really is on healing and what we now call trance healing. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment. And I've been doing different forms of healing for a long time. But now I've kind of done a lot of the practical and then I've gone back to theory. So I've been studying for quite a while under different mentors. And so now that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Wow. And like I said, I haven't heard your story, but I am very curious because I know you've sort of spoken about the years that you've been doing this. So I'm very curious as to what has happened in those years. So when you're ready, I'd love for you to let us know this story.
Okay. So I'll start when I was a child. I guess I never felt like I fitted in with just with life around me. When it came to forming friendships, I was often the third one that joined two other people who were friends. And it was if I was often on the sidelines. And that was my own choice, really. I was described many years later by a very old friend as being a free spirit. And that interested me because I thought, it was obvious then, was it? You know, and I think I was. I used to try and help people when I was a child. And I remember I would go around to neighbours' houses at Christmas when they lived on their own and I'd wrap them up little presents. And I was always very aware when people were on their own. And I wanted to be there to kind of help people. My mum was quite spiritual and it's funny, isn't it? But you often don't have these full conversations. And it's only years later when they've passed that you think, I should have asked more about that. But my family background regarding religion was quite different because my paternal grandfather was Jewish and both my maternal grandparents were Catholic. My mum was brought up Catholic in a convent. But they decided to bring us up Church of England. So I had to go to the Church of England church and do Sunday school and all things like that. So I think you could say that God, the creator, has always been part of my life in that sense. My mum would often talk to me and say to me, if you want to connect, what you need to do is just to lie there and say, I'm open to receive. And that was how I think she did it at that point. Spiritualist churches were part of my life from a very early age. And as were Catholic churches. And I think when it came to the whole concept of church, I would go to other churches. I would take myself off on a Sunday. They never quite knew where I was going. And I would go to Methodist churches and Baptist churches, and I would sit there and I would listen to what they had to say. And I would look around and think, oh, yes, this is what this is. But I never felt that comfortable in any of them. It was still like I was on the sidelines. And it was only really when I started going to spiritualist churches more that's where I felt at home. That's where I felt I could just be me, because there was no expectations. And I think in organised religion there is, expectations. And I've never been very good at conforming in that sense when I feel like I'm being squeezed into a box. But I was also the child. My parents had problems, and I was the child that, even though I was the youngest, would often resort to sorting things out. I can remember my mum attempting suicide, and I think I was only 5, and I called the ambulance and packed the bag. And it was kind of like, I remember my grandma told me years later, the ambulance man said he'd never met a more level-headed child. And it was kind of as though that was my role, even from a very early age, to care. And when I was 11, my father took his own life, which then had a huge impact on myself and my sisters. And that obviously changed my life, forever, really. I would see him in dreams. He would come to me. And I used to see him in full Technicolor in a garden with flowers, because he liked being in the garden. And that's how he used to come through to me then. And I guess the thing with me is I haven't questioned experiences. I just accept them. I just go with the experiences. And from then, it kind of like going into my teens and into my 20s, my early 20s, I was very much attracted to cards and crystals, and I used to read cards for people. I would go to a lot of the mind, body, spirit fairs, where as soon as I walked in, somebody would say to me, oh, you're a healer. And I say, oh, okay, right, not quite knowing what to say. When if I had a reading, they'd say, you should be doing this, you can do this. But I never really took it too seriously. And when I was married, and my ex-husband was a vet, okay? And I was working for Age Concern, again, looking after older people, caring, especially those who'd had bereavement, and I was doing bereavement courses. So I've always been associated with grief and trying to help people with grief of losing people. And I think part of that was because I believed there was something more. So that became quite a theme in my life. I co-authored a book with my husband because I did a lot of research on how people feel when they lose animals, because there was nobody doing any of that work when I was doing that in the 80s. And so I ran a huge survey of over 1,000 people, and somebody from the Saturday Telegraph helped me put it in the papers, and I got a huge response. And I started to write for Dogs Today magazine, a column on bereavement. I'd get invited to go and teach, well, not teach, but inform vets and veterinary staff about the bereavement process for animals, because there were some dreadful dreadful stories about people who'd been given their pets back in the bin bag and things like that. And, it was like, no, that's not right. There's something needs to just move a little bit. So I actually worked for a very large company for a while, and I would go and help train their veterinary nurses and just explain to them how to cope with someone when they're losing an animal and what it actually means to them. And when it comes down to it, it's about communication, it's about respect. And it's about love, and it's about recognizing that those things are needed, when a soul is transitioning. So I wrote the book. I wrote for the magazine for about 20 years, and I was very much in that sort of media. But I also studied then and ended up going back to university because when people saw the research that we'd done, it was kind of like, you should be doing psychology, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And we did some published papers and things, and I did go to university to study psychology. And then I kind of stayed in that academic field for quite a long time, looking at environmental psychology as well, because that interested me. Again, how the environment impacts on people, particularly in nature and things like that. So there is kind of a common theme going through my life, really. I then became a forensic psychologist. And as I became a forensic psychologist, I was working in prisons. And at one point, I spent a long time working with the younger people in prisons. And again, it was as if I could see those who were in need of guidance, spiritual guidance. So that wasn't my role in the prison, but I could just be there for them, and I would allow them to talk and try, and they would open up to me. So we could get, sometimes, people do bad things, but for good reasons. And it was about really trying to get to what had led them to that point. So I did that for a long time. All the time I was still having readings myself and going to the church and things like that. I also had an experience with angels, which I won't go into too much, but I suddenly started having the angels come to me in my dream state. And at one point they took me off into the mountains and I sat with them, and it was just beautiful. And they kept giving me messages and telling me how to deal with my life at that point, which wasn't going very well. So I became very, very connected with the angel realm. And then when I was sort of in my 50s, I was coming to the end of my time working in one of the prisons. My daughter was at university, and it was a point in my life where I could do something I wanted to do, which was quite novel for me because I usually did what other people wanted to do. And it was kind of like, I could go anywhere, I could do anything. Anyway, I talked to Spirit, and it was kind of like you're going to New Zealand, and it was quite a big thing, really. And within 6 months I'd sent some emails off and rented my house out and was on the plane to New Zealand. And that was in 2011, the beginning of 2011. And I went there not knowing anybody. And I went to Auckland, first of all, to work in the prisons there. And that was quite an experience. But what I loved most of all was the Maori people, because they had the elders, and they are such spiritual people. And they recognized that in me, which was wonderful because I didn't have to say anything to them. They just saw it. So we would, over in New Zealand, they would have what they call Maori service providers who would work in the prisons from that point of view for their spiritual health. And I would often work alongside them just to try and help some of these people. And that became quite a passion. And I worked there and then for a while, and then I was more or less told again by Spirit that I was in Auckland then, that I was moving down to Wellington, and I thought, oh no, I'm not, because very, very windy in Wellington. I don't want to go there. But yes, that's what happened. I ended up, in Wellington, again, not knowing anybody. And I lived in what's called the Wairarapa, which is a beautiful valley where they do a lot of the wine trails. And I found myself down there at Christmas and all on my own, not knowing anybody. But it was quite interesting because I went out and went in a charity shop, and I was talking to a lady, and I just said, oh, I'm on my own kind of thing. I've just moved here. And I think it was coming up for Christmas Eve. And she says to me, oh, I'll come round and see you if you want. We could just have a chat. So that was lovely. And she came. But what was really interesting is that she bought me a bunch of sweet peas. Now, sweet peas was the flower that my father used to grow. And I love sweet peas. And it was just, it just melted my heart, really, because I just thought, oh, no, they're there. They're with me, And then a bit later on the radio, they came on the song Tell Laura I Love Her. And I just thought, oh, that's wonderful. They're just letting me know I'm not on my own, And it was just kind of like these things that were happening around me. And I settled down there, and I eventually switched my life to working with victims of violence, particularly sexual violence, over in New Zealand. And that was quite an experience. But when I'd first arrived in New Zealand, I was going to look at my first sort of apartment to stay in. And I was saying, oh, yes, I think I'd like it here. And I was stood outside with the people who were renting it out. And all of a sudden, we were encircled by about 15 beautiful monarch butterflies. And they just encircled us and danced all around us. And, of course, the butterflies are often meant to signify, past people who've passed over. And I just thought, oh, yes, I know this is the right place, And it was kind of things like that kept happening, coincidences. And I noticed that my neighbour, she had an angel in her window, and she commented, because I had one in my window, and we got talking, and she told me about a lady who did readings. So again, it was like, oh, okay. I didn't have to go looking for any of these things. They just came to me. And I went to see her, and she put me in touch with Carol McCarthy, who's over in Auckland in New Zealand, who's a brilliant medium. And from then on, Carol became my mentor. And I did one-to-one development with her for most of the time I was in New Zealand, which was 10 years. And during that time, spiritually, I think what I found was so different about being in New Zealand is that the frequency over there was much, much higher than it is over in Britain. And it was as if, I don't know, it was just lighter, and I felt lighter. And there was, of course, the space there, whereas Britain is very overcrowded and built up. You get huge spaces there, and you've got mountains, and you've got all the beautiful beaches. And it was as if you could just be yourself. You could just be yourself over there. And it was as if I was allowed now to bring my spirituality out into the open, whereas being a forensic psychologist, it was quite difficult to kind of marry those two things up in public. So I really connected with the birds over there, and I would often have experiences when I'd just be sat there and a bird would come and fly right over my head and sort of touch my hair, and then they'd come and sit with me. And it was just beautiful. It was just really, really beautiful. And Carol was just brilliant as a mentor. And although I didn't realise it at the time, I didn't actually know a lot of what was happening. When I would sit with her, I realised now that I was being prepared for trance. And I would go home and I would sit in the power outside in nature, and the birds would all come down and my cat would sit there. And it was it was just perfect. It was just this beautiful, beautiful feeling. And then Carol and I decided to go to Lake Tekapo, which is in the South Island in New Zealand. And it's beautiful. And we went to a second lake that somebody just told us about, Lake Angelina. And when we went there, it was just like spirit were everywhere. And coming across the lake, we had all these little orbs of light coming towards us. And it was as if you could just sit there and absorb this beautiful spiritual energy. And then I sort of walked off a little bit by myself, and I stood on this little bridge, and all of a sudden, all the leaves on the ground came up in like a vortex and started spinning in front of me. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's quite something. And it was as if spirit was just letting me know that they were there. And when, obviously I took a lot of photographs because it was so beautiful, and you can actually see the green light coming down of like a nature spirit on the photographs and things like that. And this was all about, I think, my being free to be able to really, if you like, indulge my spirituality and be able to think as I wanted to think and act as I wanted to act. Because in New Zealand, there are lots of people go there because of the spiritual connection, because they feel they can be who they want to be over there. So I would meet in groups, and it was very much like-minded people coming together. So I would sometimes do some healing there as well, you know, when I met people. But I think in my work, it was about, because the Maori people are so spiritual, they were very open to healing. So what would happen is during my sessions, sometimes the angels, sometimes other figures would come and work through me to do, you know, to give them healing, the healing that they knew. So that was beautiful, because a lot of the Maori didn't conform to the Western ideas of psychology, but they saw me differently because the elders knew me and things like that. They saw me differently. So I was able to get into some of their extremely distressing experiences in a more gentle way, because spirit were helping me to do that. And I think that's probably the most rewarding work I've ever done, being able to help some of those people, because often they were brought to me and they could hardly speak, you know, but by the end we got them so they could start to live some kind of normal life again. And that in itself is a very big reward for the work that I was doing, because it's not like, for me, you know, healing is about giving. It's I'm just a tool, I'm just a vessel that the energy goes through. So I don't actually expect reward financially. I just like to be that vessel to help people. And that's what I was able to do. So yeah, that was a very rewarding time when I was there. But I think really, well, I mean, the other things I did when I was there, I did a lot of workshops. I met a lot of other spiritual people. And on one particular workshop, there were two ladies, and they were quite extraordinary. You could feel when they walked in the room that you were in the presence of a master. You know, you just got that impression, this is somebody who is very spiritual and who kind of really commanded that attention and connection. And they introduced me to the idea of the Galactic Federation. And they were working with energies far beyond our world. And again, I didn't question it. I didn't worry about it. It was just, you know, this is a higher energy. And it was, you know, I would tap into that as well. And at one point they did regression on me. And that was really interesting as well, because they gave me an explanation of why I was the way I was. And I think it's very interesting when someone can do that to you, because somehow you don't feel as though you're to blame for everything in your life that's gone wrong. And I think that in itself is a blessing and can help people to fully understand. I think, especially as my view is, we're a soul and we come to Earth to experience this human life. And the reason we do that is so we can learn and we can develop. And you've often heard it said, that you'll keep getting presented with the same situation if you don't learn how to deal with it. And it's only going to go away until you learn how to deal with it. And I think that was very true for me. I had a lot of lessons to learn. And it was quite a learning experience, my life. I suffered a lot of illness throughout my life. So there were times when I was very vulnerable. But I think, as with most people, whereas in a work situation I was great at sorting out other people's problems, in my own situation I wasn't. I didn't speak up for myself. And that is something that I'm still really learning about, how to do that. And I think that's true for a lot of people. It can be hard to fight your own corner when it's actually very easy to fight the corner of other people. But coming back to sitting in New Zealand and sort of just being with nature, I would just go most nights and sit in nature with the birds. I'd always find birds came and sat alongside me. And I'd sit in my own home with the birds as well. And that for me was very enriching. It kind of like fed my soul, that being in that energy of nature. And then, of course, COVID hit. And that changed the world and changed so many people's lives. And there was so much transition occurring. And it was at that point I was kind of told I was going back to the UK, which seemed, it came out the blue, the same as going to New Zealand did. And I was kind of like, okay, all right, a bit of a shock. But I had to have a lot of work done on me spiritually, because by this time my frequency had gone quite high and it needed to be lowered to be able to come back to the Northern Hemisphere, is what I was told. And I had to have a lot of healing done on me. And I can remember on one occasion I was sat on a little meditation stool and a friend was doing some healing on me. And I felt this, I felt like the stool was rocking. It was a very strong energy. And I was pretty sure I was moving from side to side like this. And my cat, I could hear in the background, my cat was suddenly coming around and getting very interested in what was going on. Anyway, I said at the end to my friend, oh gosh, did you see that rocking? And she said, no, you didn't move. And I said, oh, wow, well, that was quite a shock of energy I got. And she said, well, yes, she says that was just them lowering their energy to come down to meet your energy. And I thought, oh, okay. And then I started, I think, to understand a lot more about energy. I've always believed that we are energy and that everything is energy. But obviously there hasn't been the proof, the scientific proof there to kind of back that up in ways. And I think now that is starting to come out a bit more since they've done the collider experiments, and we split the atom, and beginning to realize that scientists can't explain everything that happens anymore. So now they're starting to look for other explanations. And those who've studied spirituality and who are spiritual are beginning to sort of look at this with a bit more interest, because whilst we've been saying that the spirit world is there and it's all around us, it's taken a long time for that to be accepted. And, you know, going back to the 1800s, when the first mediums were coming, you know, out and were kind of like trying to explain what this connection was. And of course, there were quite a lot of frauds, you know, in those early days as well. So it's taken, you know, a long time to get credibility. And I think now there are many people who do trust in the spirit world. And yes, there are still a lot out there who are skeptical, and that's fine, because each individual is on their own journey and they have to come to their own understanding of anything in terms of what they believe in. And I was sat thinking the other day about what, with my early experiences with churches, and what were the common themes that attracted me. And I remember going into the Catholic Church with my grandma very regularly and lighting candles. And it was always about the light. It was always about the light. It was about the peacefulness and the connection there. And with spirituality, that is about the light and us connecting with the light. And if you look at lots of different religions around the world, light is a common theme. And, you know, Diwali is a festival of light. And you get other, you know, religions that celebrate with light, that light candles, that do this. And so it's interesting that whilst they're all different slightly in what they believe, there is a shared element of a higher source, and B, the light is so important. And I think that that's really important in the sense that I believe that religion is man-made and spirituality isn't. It comes from the spirit world, and it comes from the need to develop. And I think that there is, you know, for me, I'm very much on my journey. I'm not in any rush to do anything. I'm very much in about my spiritual journey and how I can get to that point of ascension and be with the light. And I think that, yeah, everybody has to just go with what they believe in. But I think there are many people who have experiences that they just can't explain. And when I came back here to the UK, I was kind of left feeling a bit lonely in terms of my spiritual friends were all in New Zealand. So although I was keeping in touch with them, they all started to say to me, oh, you need to go and connect with the church over there. And so I was just starting to do that. And I was just going for my first development class there when I had an accident, literally, as I was crossing the road to go into the church, which then caused me a lot of problems for the next 4 or 5 years, which have just been resolved now because I had spinal injuries and things like this that I didn't realise. And it's kind of interesting that a lot of the major things that have happened in my life have been somehow connected to spirituality in some way, both positive and negative. But for me, it's about learning. And I think that the fact I came back to England and I was then diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and I already had some other existing conditions, it was kind of like, this is a real blow. And my work was everything to me. Helping people was everything. And I tried to set up a practice back in England, and I realized I just didn't have the capability to do it, and to do it with integrity. And I'm not the kind of person who does something half-heartedly. And if I feel I can't do something 100% and give 100%, then I'd rather not do it. But I realized that I just wasn't able to, with the brain fog and the tiredness, the fatigue and the pain. I just could not be reliable to do my old job as a psychologist. And that took me a good few years to come to terms with. And I think I wasn't coming to terms with it. And then when I had the accident, it was like I really was put flat on my back. And I've known occasions when spirit has put me flat on my back before. And those are normally times when I really have to just stop and think about what is really going on. And I think so often in life, we just keep going. And I'm very good at finding things to focus on and you know, that I'm interested in. Anything to avoid having to think. But then I was put in a position when I had to really think. And I think at that point, my spirituality began to deepen. And I'd always been interested in grief and transition. And apart from the book on pet loss, I did a lot of research in the prisons on it as well. And really, I think that transition is something that's so difficult for the living, and yet for those who are passing on, you know, it's welcome because they know it's time. And I had an experience in New Zealand when I met this beautiful, beautiful lady called Scylla, who had a lovely, lovely family, and she almost became like a second mum to me. And she was very spiritual, and she did a lot of healing herself. And then I was doing some healing on her, and I knew she was the kind of lady who wouldn't say much about herself if she wasn't well or anything like that. But I picked up that there were problems there. And it turned out she had cancer, and the cancer was getting quite advanced. And I would go and see her whenever I could, drive out to where she lived in her villa and do some healing on her. And just because the healing would send her to sleep. And sometimes when you're on morphine and other opiates like that, the sleep you go into isn't quite the same as a kind of a natural, gentle sleep that you know you kind of move towards. So I would do that. And when it got to the point that she had to go to the hospice, they called the ambulance. And what happened was she loved the little birds, the sparrows. There's a little tiny bird over there, and it's just Periwaka Waka, it's called, and it's just a very, very tiny bird. We call it fantail. And she loved these little birds, and she always used to find that they were around her. And when they came to get her into the ambulance was full of these birds. They'd all flown into the ambulance. And they had to sort of get them out, but it was as if they were going with her. It was as if the spirit world was going with her in the ambulance. And they took her to the hospice, and when she got there, she was actually put in the same room as her daughter had passed in some years before. But on the windowsill were all these little fantails all waiting for her. And when I learned she was there, my connection to her was so strong that I said to my boss, I'm going to be with my friend, and I don't know when I'll be back. And I just left. And I went, and in order that her two beautiful daughters could sleep in the family room so that they could be there all the time, I would sleep in her room on a chair bed, and so that I could be with her at all times if she cried out or whatever. And that was it was a very sad time, but it was also a very beautiful time because she was such a beautiful soul. And what was really interesting is that one day I suddenly asked her daughters if they wanted a cup of tea, and they both said yes, and they were sat either side of her. So I walked into the kitchen, and I was just making the tea, and a Maori man came in, and he started to talk to me, and he kept me there for quite some time. And when I walked back to the room with the tea, they both just looked at me, and she transitioned in that time. And I just thought, okay, so she just wanted to be with her daughters, and that was beautiful. That was absolutely beautiful. And then I just tried to support the family, and I'm still in contact with them, and they've become, good friends and everything. But she was just an amazing woman. And one of the things she loved was rainbows. She loved rainbows and the song of, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Anyway, as I was driving back home after her funeral, we went back to one of the houses, and there was a beautiful rainbow over the house. And then I saw 5 rainbows on the way back to my house. And when I got there, I was obviously upset. And I was stood on my little balcony, and I had my big, big cat in my arms. And this little tiny fantail flew straight up to me and looked me straight in the face like that and stayed there. My cat didn't bother it. And then it flew off. And I kind of felt that was like her spirit had sent that to me just to make that final connection. And I don't know, she just was such a wonderful lady. She was only tiny, but she'll never be forgotten. She'll never be forgotten. And one day I was over in Australia visiting her daughter, and we were in a shop and laughing, and all of a sudden, Somewhere Over the Rainbow came on, on the music. And it was like, okay, so Scylla's with us, Scylla's with us. And I think it's little things like that. And some people will just say, oh, that's just coincidence. And other people will say there's no such thing as coincidence. Things happen at the right time for a reason. And I think you have to go with what you believe in to be authentic. And I've had too many of these, things happen for me not to believe that it is the spirit world trying to contact me. And when I was back in the UK, I started to, if you like, go back to the drawing board a little bit and start to do some courses with a lot of the English mediums like Tony Stockwell. And I also do Libby Cook's courses, who is wonderful. And I've worked with a lot of different trance mediums as well. And it's like what you learn, again, is everybody has their own take on things, and they will teach in a particular way. And some are very strong in what they believe in, and that this is the way you have to do it. Now, as I said earlier, I'm not very good at being told I have to do something. I will always seek out more information. I think that's the basic researcher in me. But I will always go back and think, okay, so I will do lots of courses, and I will listen to lots of people, and I will take from each what resonates with me, what I think is needed to further me along my journey. And that's what I've done and where I am. And I just think really that this is a very, very exciting time for spirituality. And I think as with the quantum physics and what the physicists are saying about quantum fields and energy and all these things they can't explain, and quantum entanglement and things like that, and how one thing can affect something, a million miles away. It's kind of like, okay, so what is at work here? What is? And is it something that we don't know and we haven't been able to explain up until now? So I think that, and I believe that the spirit world are coming in a lot closer now. And one reason for that is there is so much conflict and so much wrong with our world. There are those who can't, find enough to eat. And there are those who, live in luxury. And it kind of feels like some people get so much for doing so little. And yet there are those who do so much and receive so little. And I think that our society is very much the wrong way round when it comes to recognizing the worth and the value of people and carers and hospital workers and firemen and people who put their lives at risk for other people. And then you see footballers, and I have nothing against footballers, but earning ridiculous amounts of money. And I know they're very skilled, and it's because they can bring the crowds in and everything, and it's national sports. But there still it feels out of balance in the world that that we don't have to live in poverty. We shouldn't, at this stage in our evolution, we shouldn't have to live in poverty. And I think partly the healing is coming down now because the need for power of some people who are in control is so great that we run the risk of things really getting out of balance. And I feel that I'm part of that healing, and I want to be part of that healing. And I would like people to be able to feel at ease with themselves. And a lot of that is around grief and around whether, trying to cope with the loss of a loved one, and being able to bring some comfort to people, to give evidence of afterlife, I think is, for me, something that's worthwhile doing. And I was at church just last night and just listening to the messages given and seeing the people smiling, really smiling, because they recognised what the medium was saying. And it was just like, good job, good job there. You've changed that person. You've really given them something there. And it was, I think that's what makes it worthwhile. Yeah. So that really is my story. There's other bits and bobs, but that really is my story.
Yeah. And what a remarkable journey you've been on, Laura. I mean, just the traveling by yourself to another country where you don't know anyone, phenomenal. And making that work, incredible. And I love the fact that, and I find it so interesting when you talk about how spiritual New Zealand is, and people know it and they expect it to be like that. Therefore, it is so widely and openly accepted. And that's just so beautiful. And it's amazing how you've been able to explain the contrast with, like you're saying, Britain. The difference between Britain and New Zealand is incredible. We're all living in the same world, yet so much contrast. And the beliefs and the culture, so different. That's just incredible. And the courage. I'm just going to say, you are one brave lady. the courage to do that on your own, though, so many people, your fear would get in the way and stop them from going anywhere. They just stay there in their safe space. But look at the amazing adventures that you've had there, the beautiful people you've met, the experiences. And I love the way you described and explained when your friend passed, how it's such a sad moment, but it was so beautiful. So it really does go to show that, transitioning, or you call it transitioning, which I think is a beautiful soft word for it. Other people may just call it passing or death. Doesn't have to be, I think, so. Sometimes it's quite harsh, or people try and push it away. They don't want to talk about it. And I understand it's a terrible emotional trauma for a lot of people, but you made that so beautiful. And I'm going to assume that obviously also comes down to the culture of this family as well. And for her daughters to be able to be at home with her during that time, and how beautiful that was for her to be with them in that transitioning moment. So, wow. And the fact that at 5 years old, you're calling an ambulance, there's all these things that you're saying. I'm sitting back listening like, you really did have to grow up quickly.
Yeah.
Like incredibly quickly. And you can start to see there, and it's obviously in you, you were obviously born with this nurturing, caring, way that you have, and have found yourself in these situations where you have been mature enough to be able to, and I'd hate to even think any 5-year-old going through that, but to handle that and deal with that and be able to, make sense of it. Because for most 5-year-olds, that's way over their head. And the fact that you would go off to church, different churches every Sunday. I've never heard a child do that. It's like, what? But such a mature and adult thing to do. I have never, ever heard of a child being curious. And viewers and listeners, if you have a child or you were a child that was like Laura and curious at that, at such a young age, to go and visit churches. And I just think, wow, you must have, obviously an old soul coming into this young body, to want to explore these different religions. Just incredible. But again, like you say, and when you talk of energy, I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Now you can look back and sort of think, was it the energy of these spiritual places that drew you there to start with? Like you're saying, the peace, the lighting of the candles, they just have that energy about them, don't they? Churches and spiritual places. It's just incredible. Did your parents not think, where has she gone for hours on end?
No. I mean, when you go back to when I was a child, it was pretty safe wandering about. And we used to go off by ourselves all the time. A lot of the time, if we went out walking in the country, which we did, we used to go into the fields. We had a big German Shepherd dog that came with us, and she was always there with us. But no, I mean, I was a big walker, and so I would just walk to these churches, and that's what I did. I'm going out, and off I went. It's interesting, the different aspects of what is within religious places. And what I've found recently is that I'm quite drawn to religious places at the moment. And I was down in Norwich last year, visiting my son and future daughter-in-law, and it was beautiful because she took me to Norwich Cathedral, and I just loved the energy there. It was just so beautiful. And then she took me to another place, which I've now totally forgotten the name of. But there's an old abbey there, and that, again, had beautiful energy. But then as we were walking back, I saw this little place, and I could tell it looked really, really old. There were some, going back to the 15th, 16th century before, houses and buildings. And I asked to go in it, and the lady said, "Oh, I'm just shutting." And I said, "Oh, well, can we just come in for a second?" She said, "Yes." And they were using it as an art gallery at that point. And it was only a small building with a very, very high ceiling. And it was Thomas Becket, and it was he was very much around in the time of the Reformation, when Henry V was trying to get rid of the Catholic Church, and he sort of tried to protect some of the relics that were being burnt and destroyed and things like that. And this had been a place where the monks used to go to pray originally. And it had been used as many things since. But when I walked in that place, I just stood still because the energy was immense and the peacefulness. And I could just feel that all around. And when you go to places like that, you want to stay there. You really want to stay there. And I do believe that in some religious places there are there's such a build-up of power and energy and prayer that it touches you. It touches you at any time of day or night. Having said that, I've never believed that you have to go to a particular building to connect with God. I suppose I've talked to God all my life, really, and I just feel that, God and the consciousness, the collective consciousness, is all around with, as is the spirit world. And it's up to us to free our mind of these sort of human constraints that we put on it. And we only see things in human terms. And yet I think and believe that what is coming and what will come, at some point, is that we will begin to understand that there are other dimensions and that there are other things going on, that if we freed ourselves from the constraints of our human mind, we would be able to tap into. And there are those that do tap into them. And we talk about altered states of consciousness when you go into trance, but we're in an altered state of consciousness when we go into sleep. We go down levels. And I have many, many experiences. And my experiences are so lucid and so, I don't know, I just see everything and experience everything and go to some strange places. And it's as though I really am there. So, is this astral traveling? Probably. It probably is, because I go back to the same places, and I think it's difficult to do that in a dream. But I've been going back for a number of years to the same places, and these places change slightly as well. So, I am a psychologist and I do question, but I do believe that there are other dimensions out there, and there are those that will say that everything is happening now. Any life you've ever lived is happening now in any dimension, anywhere. And I think that's why we were introduced, by Eckhart Tolle, about the power of now and just being in the moment. And that is very much what is, if you look on Facebook, there are so many people posting about being now and just being in that moment. But let's go one step further and let's say, let's be in that moment and let's shut off our human mind, and stop all those thoughts coming in. and just allow us to really be in that now and see what really is there. And I think that is something that more people will start to try, get used to, because it is in that stillness, in that peacefulness, that I think we truly can appreciate who we really are.
And I think it's shifting what was normal, or what we've considered to be normal for so long now, shifting that to a different awareness. And as your story goes with, like I've been like listening to your story unfold, it makes me wonder whether the fact that from a child, you were going to these churches, do you think at some point when you're sitting there, I mean, for a child to sit there through a church service is a big deal. Like, how old would you have been then?
9, 10.
See, for a child of that age, they would be bored. They would be restless. Do you know what I mean? So it makes me wonder whether back then you were, I want to say, sensitive or aware of that energy to a point where I don't want to say, and I say lured in a way that it lured you in, and I say that in the nicest possible way, like a calling. And do you think when you were sitting in those churches that you were already starting to go into altered states of consciousness? You were already practicing these trance states or opening up the awareness of more, of oneness, of, you know what I mean, that expansion of consciousness. Because for a child of that age to want to go to churches to start with and be there and sit through a church service, I almost want to say is unheard of. So, this tells me from a young child, you already were going into these states. You were already open to these things, and your life unfolded to more and more and more, which, again, led to these incredible journeys to New Zealand, a place of spirituality, to meet these people who, and like they say, your energy, like attracts like. You find your vibrational people, your tribe, and you were finding these people there as an adult. So that just is it's amazing, absolutely amazing. And I love how you've mixed, should we say, the clinical side with the spiritual side, and really welcomed that in. And I mean, look, really, that's incredible. And I think we're finding more and more that is happening. And like you say, you can't openly talk to people about that when you're in in a space that's clinical. You can't just turn around and talk about spirit, because science, where's that coming in? But I think, as you said, we're finding that science is bridging that gap. That gap is getting smaller and smaller. I mean, if we look back at once upon a time, we weren't able to test DNA. This didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then it did happen. So science is changing. Discoveries are being made all the time. Just because hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to, and doesn't mean that all the questions that can't be answered now won't be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. So, yeah, but your story, so many facets, but you can see how so much is all intertwined to lead you to where you are now, to be in that space of, and again, nature. And it's almost like, Laura, as much as you've had your traumas and your illnesses, your life has been very blessed with such a connection to everything.
Yeah.
Phenomenal, just phenomenal. And do you think that in the study of, in psychology, like you said, you did forensic psychology, which blew my mind because I didn't know that about you. I'm like, what? This lady has done everything. who are you? So, but I love the fact that, you know, you've been through that and you've studied that. Do you think that that has also helped you to make sense, to also help you heal from some of your childhood traumas, the things that you went through with your dad, with, you know, with your mom, just with everything? Do you think that that's helped you understand that a little bit more, to, I guess, allow your journey to unfold a lot smoother to really embrace that spiritual side?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I would sit there when I was doing assessments of people for PTSD and other assessments, and it occurred to me at one point as I was looking at the questions that I could also answer yes to quite a few of those questions. And it occurred to me, okay, so I would have fit the bill for a few of these things I'm actually assessing for, you know, if I go back into my childhood. And you don't like to think ill of parents or anything like that. But when you sat there and you're treating somebody for conditions and situations they've lived through, I think one of the things for me is that I'd also lived through similar situations. And so I could understand the fear that they'd experienced. I could understand the uncertainty. I could understand why they questioned. I could understand why they didn't want to go out and meet people, you know. And I do think that helped me in two ways. One, to help them. And secondly, to understand my own path. And when my sister passed a few years ago, we'd had a very rocky relationship ever since my father took his own life. And it's a question of, I think that took me a long time to go back and think about all the things that had happened to us and try and put them into some kind of context, and to think about my mother and some of the things she did that were not right when I look back now as an adult, you know, when you look back as an adult. And I've done a lot of questioning, and I've had to have a lot of self-healing, because Spirit are very aware I'm going through this turmoil, or have been going through this turmoil. But I think that I've had to confront my own past. And I've had counselling. You know, I went because of my sister passing, because it brought up so many things about my childhood. And for once, I couldn't run away. I couldn't avoid that. I had to really think, okay, come on, let's face this. But I needed help to do it. And I've never been the kind of person who can go to a counsellor, because I was very good at hiding my own feelings, and I could step around things. But this time I didn't. She was a psychotherapist, and she was a beautiful lady. She really helped me to work through it and to confront some of the things I never, ever wanted to. And all kinds of memories came up, flashbacks and things to situations that I'd never really understood. And I tried to make sense of them. But what I did find is that sharing them and voicing them enabled me to let them go. And I think that that is one of the most important lessons in life, to learn to let things go, because we hold on to things and we make ourselves ill because of what we hold on to. And, you know, there was a time in my life, and I can remember when the IRA were bombing and people were getting killed all over the place. And I can remember a couple coming on television, and they were saying that they forgave those who had killed their son. And I remember thinking, wow, and also thinking, I'm not sure I could do that. But I could now, because I'm at a different place spiritually and I can understand it, and it's like that Shakespeare quote, isn't it? All the world's a stage and men and people merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. It's something like that anyway. And that always struck me when I was studying English at school, that was so true. And I thought, we come along, and it is almost when we're on this earth that we're playing a part. And I think that we play many parts in one lifetime, I played the child and the teenager. And then, in my early 20s, I was actually a radiographer, and I did that for about 10 years. And I have that. And then I have, the forensic psychologist. And, I have so many different sides to me. I worked in research for quite a while as well in the universities. And it's like, there are so many different sides to me. It's like I can almost stack them up and think, I've been all of those. But now I feel a lot more whole. I feel like those bits I've worked through and I've kind of knocked them down. And I was driving home yesterday and driving through the countryside, and I was just looking at it. And I always drive on the country roads. I hate motorways, conformity. I just like to be able to go down the country roads. And the sun was setting and it was quite beautiful. And as I come home over the hill, I can see the beach and the sea. And I just thought, I'm so happy. I am so happy in my tiny little house by the sea and by the country with my little dog and my little cat. And I've got the family, not too far away. And it's kind of like, this is it. I'm happy. I've reached a place where I am content. And it's being content with yourself. That is the most important thing. It's that inner contentment. It's not, I can remember times when I was growing up, because I didn't have a lot when I was little. I always wanted to have nice bedding. I wanted nice cutlery. I wanted the nice things that I never had. Those things were important. And they no longer are. I still like nice things, but I don't feel that they are representative of my value anymore. Now I am just me. And I can actually make decisions and decide to go somewhere or not go somewhere. And I'm happy with those decisions. And for me now, spirituality, I think, is the most important thing in my life. I have my family and 2 beautiful granddaughters and a wonderful son and daughter and son-in-law and future daughter-in-law soon. And I feel like I'm complete.
Yeah, I love that for you, Laura. That is because so many people are searching outside of themselves for exactly what you found within yourself. They're looking for the happiness. They're looking for contentment outside of themselves. I just love that. I think you're probably the first person that I've ever interviewed, or anyone that has openly and honestly said, I am in a place right now where I am content, happy. Everything it's almost like, perfection is a big word, but everything is exactly how it's meant to be. And you've got spirituality with you, and oh man, that's incredible. And again, many people put a priority on, like you're saying, the bedding, the cutlery. They're just external factors that, it doesn't define your value. And I think that's what it comes down to. Wow. It must be such a wonderful feeling for you just to, again, just know that deep within yourself and in your heart that your life it's just, you're so blessed. And that's gratitude, isn't it? That's gratitude for everything that you have and who you are and everything that you've been through. That's peace. That's where peace is made, right there. Oh, wow. Incredible. Oh, and I love the aspects where you've worked with animals, and you've written about this and you've made a difference. Look, I mean, across the time of your life, look at all the differences, the difference that you've made in people's lives through everything that you've been through, that I guess you could say that calling to peace, to finding yourself through, like I said, the churches, traveling to other countries, and after everything you've been through are all, this is what brings all the pieces of the puzzle together. Again, like you're saying, not only for your self-healing, but for you to be able to help others and be of service to others and help them find that completeness. Just beautiful. Just beautiful. It's almost like what you found within yourself, you're able to now give and share that light with the world. And that in itself is amazing. So, oh, wow, Laura, what a journey. I think I'm going to be walking away from this just really thinking and contemplating that just you have really had a phenomenal life. And again, I give you so much credit for the bravery in traveling to another country by yourself and just going places that you did not know anyone and starting a life there. That's not many people do that. So, yeah, really brave. Wow. But then it sounds like you've always been an adventurer. Off you went as a kid, walking off and going out into the country with the dog, going to churches, walking around. Like, it sounds like you've always been a little bit of an adventurer. You've had that, the need for curiosity and seeking and searching. I love it. I love it. And I think this is where you have the best experiences when you're out there and you're curious and you're asking questions and you're wanting to know the answers, and you find them and the answers find you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Oh, and let's not skip over the part where, you were convening with the angels. Let's not forget that part. Like, wow. And to have that,
of course, there.
yeah, and to have that guidance, to be so fortunate to have that guidance, but again, to be open and aware and accepting. And that's what it comes down to, because so many people, if you're not open and accepting, it's you're going to be pushing it away. Oh, well, Laura, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your incredible journey. And I mean incredible journey. And what I want to really express to the viewers and listeners is that you heard Laura's story. You heard what she's been through. You heard how it all unfolded, where she traveled to, the brave and courageous woman that she is. And she is still now doing mediumship, how she's stepped into it and she's open and she's accepting and she's surrendered into it, and contentment is what she's found, and peace and happiness within herself. So there is hope out there for everyone. So please, please be curious, be aware, and seek what it is that you're looking for. Thank you so much, Laura, and I look forward to having you back on the show very, very soon. Thanks for joining me at the Medium's Table. The universe is always speaking. Listen and let your spirit soar. Curious for more? Click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe.